Just before that, and while I start sharing my presentation, some exercise for all of you that I always do at the start of my session. Can each one of you take a minute or two to note down, to pen down, what are your expectations from this presentation? What is it that you want to learn? What is it that you want to hear from my session today? I for sure have something more than your expectation to share, but just in case, this will help you understand if I have covered all that you wanted to learn. And in case if there is anything more, I'd be more than happy to address those for you. For those of you who are here with open minds to understand or learn afresh of whatever I have to share, that's fine too. While you all would have noted what you want to hear from me, let me quickly tell you what I have to offer to you today. In the course of the teaming presentation that we'll be learning, I will primarily cover three dimensions to the subject. First, what are teaming agreements? Second, what are its business importance? Three, strategic teaming projects where teaming agreements are extensively used. We'll certainly talk about the technological projects that requesting to emphasize. The next would be purpose of teaming agreements, commercial and operational construct of teaming relationship. We will see some very important clauses in the teaming agreements. And finally, where do the teaming agreements fit in the gamut of project-oriented commercial agreements? Okay, hopefully you'll have a lot of takeaways after this session. Let's quickly deep dive into the understanding. First, what are teaming agreements? Teaming agreements are certainly a part of the contractual law aspect. These are agreements between two parties who team up to participate in a bid or a project. The agreement is to agree today to obligations that will apply after the project or the bid is awarded. Now, these premises will be clear when we look at the illustration. Imagine a project by Indian Railway where they are requesting proposals or requesting quotation for delivery of rail coaches for their prime train Rajdhani Express. Primary bidders or primary company that will be interested in these projects will be the wagon manufacturing company. Now, for the Rajdhani Express to look just as beautiful as this or more, would we believe that the wagon manufacturer will have all that is required to deliver a fully furnished coach? The answer would most certainly be a no. As you can see from the picture on the right, the wagon manufacturer, other than the shell and the skeleton of the wagon, will need a lot of things to deliver a coach. These would include things like the upholstery, the light, the fan, the floor mats, the windows, and so on and so forth. Now, for a project like these and many other that we'll talk through during the presentation, it makes absolute sense for the wagon manufacturing company to team up with the seat manufacturers, the window manufacturers, the floor manufacturers, the light manufacturers, and the like. Okay. Having seen this, let's understand what is the business importance behind teaming agreements. The wagon company can team up in the illustration that we had with the light, the fan, and the wheel manufacturer without deviating from its core business and offer a composite offering. Parties from different area of expertise can come together to bridge gaps for the specialties they have for themselves. Expanding customer base. Now imagine the fan manufacturer who manufactures fans for the households is now able to leverage and team up with a wagon manufacturer to be able to have Indian Railways as a new customer. The other business advantage to teaming arrangements is cost arbitrage. The simplest way to understand this is, imagine if the wagon manufacturer had to invest in manufacturing fans. The cost of place, the cost of people, the cost of machinery, etc. It would certainly not make the project viable. It is instead easier to leverage on the fan, the light, the other manufacturers whose business is profoundly what they've been doing for ages. For complex projects, the other business importance is we can have trusted advisors who bring in consultancy services, who bring in a whole gamut of expertise, having been through and done and run the projects themselves. And last, but certainly the most, capitalize on one another company's size and prestige. Let's look at some of the other projects where teaming agreements are of great importance. I'm using a phone manufacturing company as an illustration. However, all technology companies have similar form of teaming arrangements for the technology piece that they want to come up with. In this case, a phone manufacturing company will have to team up with somebody who's good at making the body of the phone, the smart glass of the phone, the IT infrastructure, the feature bit, the functionality bit, and a lot more. Second, a construction company for a project of, let's say, creating a ceiling. There will be requirements for engineering companies to team up with designers, vendors from whom they can source cement, concrete, pipes, iron, and a lot more that goes in to make a bridge. Imagine the project as complex as the smart city project. You will need construction companies, you will need IT vendors, you will need every and any vendor that you can think of to create a smart city. These teaming agreements are a very effective tool to pre-decide on commitments that will have to be given effect to after the project is awarded. So in the illustrations where the Indian Railway wants to have ready-to-use wagons manufactured, the wagon manufacturer company will want a binding proposal from the light, the fan, and the other manufacturers. This forms the essence of a teaming agreement. What else? Each party is coming together to win the bid. So parties expect that they come together with a winning attitude and giving their best. So other purpose of teaming agreement is to promise, cooperate with each other so as to be able to deliver the project well once awarded. After the project is won, the last thing that the parties want is differences. For that might result in winning of project, but losing of a teaming partner. And that is not a good business sense. So, of the many things, the sharing of revenue and profits also needs to be understood and agreed beforehand. This and the flow of relationship in a typical teaming arrangement will be clear when we understand this slide. There is prime bidder in the heart of the teaming agreement. The prime bidder is the one who fulfills commitments and enters into obligations directly with the customer. Prime bidder in the case of the wagon manufacturer is incompetent to fulfill all the requirements of customer, the Indian Railway, hence will enter into obligations with several other sub-bidders, meaning the prime bidder will commit to customer the delivery of fully done coaches for the premium Rajdhani Express. In the back end, other than the shell and skeleton of the wagon, it will source obligations with respect to fans, lights, and several other things from the sub-bidders. The corollary to it is how payment happens. In case of payment, the flow is just the opposite. Payment will come from customer, will flow to the sub-bidder through the prime bidder. So let's hypothetically assume that the price for the wagon manufacturer's piece of deliverable is ₹100, and the fees for and on behalf of the fan manufacturer is ₹20. So prime bidder will commit delivery of wagon along with fans for 120 rupees. Customer will pay 120 rupees to the prime bidder. The prime bidder will keep 100 rupees for himself and pass on the 20 rupees to the fan supplier. I hope you're able to understand and appreciate the flow of obligations and the flow of payment. Next, we'll see different forms, different contractual terms which form a part of the teaming agreement. Like I mentioned, to re-emphasize, most important is the purpose and the intent why a team is formed. What the pictures that you're able to see on the screen are just for demo purposes. I will send a draft or a template teaming agreement along with the slide deck. So it's okay if you're not able to read the content, only the headings for the purpose of this presentation are of importance. Then what goes in is that there have to be terms and conditions making clear how the proposal would be finalized and adhered to. One of the most important clauses is the clause on confidentiality. You will appreciate that if information relating to commercial and technical proposals leak, then that could give a competitive advantage to the competitors. And that is not healthy for the team that is coming together to win the bid. Hence, confidentiality forms the very heart of teaming agreement. As a good practice, there are organizations which insist on non-disclosure agreements to be signed between the teaming entities even before they expose project details to the sub-vendors. For those of you who are not familiar with a non-disclosure agreement, it is an agreement where parties agree to keep information relating to a project or a relationship confidential, meaning not share the information with any party other than the party with whom the agreement is entered into, and only for the purpose why the information needs to be shared. Yet another important clause relates to intellectual property rights. Invariably, the terms which are of paramount importance, especially in technology agreements, are with respect to ownership of intellectual property that is developed by either the sub-bidder or the prime bidder, but provided for the consumption by the end customer. Then we have general terms and conditions which are popularly known as boilerplates. These will have terms and conditions like which law will govern the teaming agreement, what would be the jurisdiction of the courts in case of disputes, and others. The next set of terms that form part of the contract are, I would say, one of the ones which are most negotiated and sometimes could be very controversial. For the purpose and ease of understanding, here are these terms. They are popularly known as flow down terms and conditions. Now, what do I mean by flow down terms and conditions? There are two types of flow down terms and conditions. One, which relate to the project, and the other, which relates to the specific piece of deliverable which is committed either by the prime bidder or by the sub bidder. To give you an example, Indian Railway specifies that the thickness of the wagon that are delivered for the Rajdhani Express have to be about ABC millimeter thick. Now you will understand and appreciate that the prime bidder cannot expect a fan manufacturer or a floor mat manufacturer to adhere to this condition. Now this is one of the simplest ones. However, intricate projects can have complex flow down conditions. Payment obligations. As per request for proposal, in the illustration we are talking, Indian Railway may commit to the prime bidder to pay the total project fees upon first successful run of the train. Now, this may happen within a span of about 6 to 8 months. Theoretically, there may be vendors who may not be able to extend credit term beyond a 60 days or a 90 days because it does not suit their business model. Such and other commitments need to be pre-agreed as a part of the payment obligations. Then there are a whole set of indemnities and warranties. This piece is extremely dear to the hearts of lawyers, for this is an area which the lawyers understand and appreciate the most. What are indemnities? Just for simplicity's sake, we'll pick on an illustration. The Rajdhani Express is fully functional. There is a passenger who tries to adjust his seat. The headrest to the seat breaks and the passenger injures his head. The passenger will put a claim on Indian Railways. Indian Railways will in turn put the claim on the prime bidder, and the prime bidder in turn will put this claim back on the seat manufacturer. So in the given case, the seat manufacturer will have to give an indemnity to the prime bidder, so that in the event if there is a claim, the prime bidder does not suffer damages on account of a wrong done by the seat manufacturer. Last, yet the most intriguing of all clauses in my humble submission is the clause on exclusivity. Now, what do we mean by exclusivity? Exclusivity means prime bidder may want that the sub bidder works exclusively only with the prime bidder, meaning the sub bidder may not be able to participate in the bid with any other bidder. Now, there are risks and rewards related to this point. Prima facie, on the face of it, it might seem not a good business proposition. There are 3 bidders who are participating in the bid for Indian Railways. Why would I, as a fan manufacturer, want to put all my bets on company A, where I am unsure or where I have reasons to believe or reasons to comprehend that the winner could be either bidder 2 or bidder 3. Having said this, the answer to the clause on exclusivity or decision on exclusivity is not as simple as in the example that I've given. Imagine if we are talking of creating or constructing an airport. We know there has been one company which has won and constructed airports for London, New York, Mumbai, Dubai, and some of the most world-class airports that we know of. If I am a supplier of concrete, and if I have reasons to believe that it's again the same entity which is most likely to win the project that we are teaming up together for, I may consider teaming up exclusively with the bidder. What next? The bid gets awarded, the project gets awarded, and the teams get into what is understood as the definitive commercial agreements. These agreements will vary from project to project. A very special emphasis to understand the ecosystem between teaming agreements and this definitive agreement is, let's say for the team that came up together to build Rajdhani Express, we could be looking this as a project, and therefore there will be an enterprise project agreement. The fundamental of this will have been laid out in the teaming agreement. Imagine we are coming up to deliver a project of smart city. There will have to be a master services agreement in place where all the vendors come together to deliver services. Again, the foundation of this master service agreement will have been laid out in the teaming agreement that the teams participated in before the bid was awarded. One of the most known agreement is the master technology agreement. This agreement is extremely dear to all the technology companies. In the case of the phone manufacturer that we spoke, there will be a whole host of technology vendors who would come together, either provide licenses of software, either sell servers or lease NOCs and hardwares. And all of these will form a part of the agreement, as we call the master technology agreement. Again, to emphasize, the foundation of all that will go into the master technology agreement will be something which would have been agreed and understood as a part of the teaming agreement. Once these agreements, these definitive agreements are in place, after the project is awarded, the next thing that happens is execution of the project. Meaning, in the illustration that we started with, the fan manufacturer will have to, in a timely manner and as per specifications agreed, deliver fans to the wagon manufacturing company. The light manufacturer, the floor mat manufacturer, the window manufacturer, all of these will have to then participate in the execution by fulfilling delivery of all that they have committed for. This pretty much brings us to the end of all the three dimensions, the legal, the operational, and the business aspect of teaming agreements. If you have any questions, comments, or thoughts, I'm more than happy to address.
So the first question is, at times the partner may not be familiar with the bidder. In such cases, what is the due diligence you suggest to verify the credentials of the partner?
So, very valid question. You are into business where you are expanding a customer base in the slide that we saw. There could be a scenario where you are anyways venturing into uncertain, unknown territories, and therefore you are not sure whether who is the bidder or who all are the bidders, and for that matter, which is the right bidder for you to participate with. In that case, the diligence that happens is also three-dimensional. One, you will check the customer credentials of the bidder, meaning has the bidder executed any or how many projects of similar nature for which they are asking you to participate or team up. Second will be the operational expertise as to does the bidder with whom you are teaming up have the right skill set to be able to deliver the project. And third, and the most important, is does the bidder have the commercial appetite to be able to fulfill commercially all the risks and obligations for the project. So the diligence will be threefold for each of these bidders.
Would it be correct to say that consortium are an example of a teaming agreement?
Very good question. There is a fine line of understanding between a consortium agreement and a teaming agreement. Invariably in India, the consortium agreement and teaming agreement are interchangeably used. However, there is a world of difference, and I'll tell you what that world of difference is. And in a consortium agreement, the fundamental premise is it's one for all and all for one, meaning there are obligations by the teaming partners. Let's say there are 3 teaming partners who have come together to deliver a project. Under a consortium agreement or a consortium arrangement, if partner A is not able to fulfill his set of deliverables, partner B is expected to fill in the gap for partner A. Now, this might theoretically sound okay, so what? Okay, but let's try and understand this from the illustration of the wagon manufacturer that I spoke about. If the fan manufacturer is expected to fulfill obligations on behalf of the wagon manufacturer, do you believe it's going to be operationally, financially, or from the timeline perspective any possible for them to be able to deliver wagons while its core business for years has only been to manufacture fans? Answer is a no. And this answer to this question helps most of the corporates decide whether a consortium agreement is an option or unviable.
Can you throw some more light on any other interesting technology contracts and any nuances that you could point out to which touch upon teaming agreement?
Most certainly, sure. So let me talk about a project, okay, that I had participated. In fact, this is one of the projects where I dealt with the largest number of teaming partners, and the number to my knowledge was more than 63. This was a very interesting project where United Nations wanted to leverage SIM cards for the purpose of a UN deputed army in Africa. Okay. Extremely complex as it sounds, it had several facets. Global parties involved. Then you had technical specifications, capabilities around the globe involved. You have model agreements from United Nations, which you can't deviate from. Africa as a region, which primarily was the entity from where all the contracting had been done. So while all of this is complex and challenging, the fundamentals that we as lawyers, as in-house corporate counsel struck to were all of those which I have explained today. These are all the principles that you need to know and understand about teaming contracts. Like I said, the clauses that merit or that take up most of the time for negotiations are the back-to-back flow down terms and conditions, like I mentioned. Okay. And in the illustration that I gave, we spoke of a very simple scenario. Okay. Now, allow me to articulate by giving a slightly complex scenario. Okay. In the same illustration where the commitments are to deliver coaches for Rajdhani Express, the Indian Railway has put a condition that that the delivery has to be in a timely manner. In case if there is delay in delivery, then there will be damages, penalties, and ultimately there will be triggering of a bank guarantee of sorts. Okay. Now, as a sub vendor, you would want not to take on these liabilities. As a prime bidder, you would want to hedge your risk, because as a prime bidder, your responsibilities of a composite delivery comprises of obligations by yourself and by the other bidders whom you are teaming up with. So generally how these get settled is one has to understand what is the relevance of the obligations which are asked to be committed. So the prime bidder has, for lack of choice, no option but to concede and agree to the timelines that the Indian Railway is expecting. Now, in doing so, the prime bidder has to be judicious and understand an estimate of timelines from the sub bidders and his own stakeholders, such that despite the fact that the agreement provides for liquidated damages on account of untimely delivery, in practice, such a situation does not arise. So to me, I would say the most challenging of all terms and conditions in teaming agreements are the ones which relate to flow down of obligations.
If one of the team members does not agree to arbitration, then what happens? And the second question is, please describe how consideration part is fulfilled if largest number of partners has entered into a teaming contract.
So first, what happens if one of the bidders, one of the teaming partners does not agree to a common arbitration or a common form of remediation? Okay, so imagine the project that we are discussing, and I'm constantly harping on that as an illustration so that things become clearer and we are able to visualize and relate to what I'm trying to explain here. The tender, the request for proposal or quotation is floated by the Indian Railway. Okay, so let's believe that that's the central government which is issuing this RFP. So most likely the prime bidder will want all the teaming agreements to be subject to laws of India and the courts in Delhi, and arbitration venue of which will have to be Delhi. Now, imagine a sub bidder who has no presence in Delhi, okay, who set up a fresh shop, okay, primarily based out of Maharashtra. He will essentially insist on having arbitration in any city within Maharashtra. Now, then there is a clear conflict. Okay. Now, there are two ways to resolve this. The prime bidder, if it has a setup in places other than Delhi, then it may, in the interest of closure or in the interest of goodwill, agree to the request of sub-bidder and concede to the venue of arbitration to be something other than Delhi, which could be either Mumbai or Pune or whatever other city. The yet another way is that the sub-bidder appreciates and understands that here's a prime bidder who is entering into such teaming arrangements with more than one sub-bidder, and it will be logistically a challenge if things don't go too well to have arbitration for the same project being carried out in different parts of the country. So the sub-bidder concedes to the request of the prime bidder. And third, both of them decide not to agree to venue not in Delhi, not in any city in Maharashtra, but a third neutral jurisdiction where both of them have office. So these are the three ways in which this issue of jurisdiction can be resolved.
There is a new question which says, may I know whether the partners will be separate entities from tax point of view, or will they be job workers of the main bidder?
Okay. So when we are talking about teaming agreements, all the fundamentals of contract law, which is a party who's a legal person to be able to enter into a contract, etc., will hold good. So generally the teaming agreements will form a part of larger projects. My sense is that it may not be absolutely feasible for a company to enter into teaming agreements with individuals. Having said this, teaming arrangements, there are no prerequisites with respect to nature of organization. So the teaming partners could either be corporates, companies, or sole trading concerns or partnerships. They can also be joint venture entities.
Describe how consideration part is fulfilled if largest number of partners have entered into teaming agreement.
Sure. So this is very interesting. For large projects, and we could also be talking about an engineering procurement contract, okay, where one contract or one project could run into several thousand crores of rupees, okay, and this is not by way of an illustration. These projects exist and these are real projects, okay. So a very interesting question, how or what are the thoughts around the consideration aspect of this, okay. So this is how it works. We have different vendors who come together, team up with the prime bidder to be able to make delivery of something which is composite. In this, there are some vendors who may say, my piece of work, for my piece of work, I want monies within 30 days or 60 days. I can definitely not wait beyond 60 days period, okay? While the payment terms with the prime bidder could be such that there are staggered payments or deferred payments which are linked to the milestones, okay? So upon a delivery of milestone A, the prime bidder gets a certain money, okay? Now this milestone may or may not be timeable with the payment outflow for every vendor. So there are two ways in which this works out. Generally, the prime bidder will have requested for advance money. The advance money is used towards sourcing and procuring everything which is required from day one of the project. The monies will factor payment for all those vendors who cannot wait to receive payments tagged to the milestone that the prime bidder has committed to the end customer. This is one way to mitigate. The second way to mitigate is the prime bidder has deep pockets, okay, and they are charging a heavy markup or a margin over and above the cost provided by the sub bidder. Then the prime bidder will make payments to the sub bidder upfront, and in turn, for the forward call that the prime bidder has taken, receive higher value or a premium for the deliveries for and on behalf of the sub bidder. To just articulate this in the form of an illustration, let's say the fan manufacturer says, I can give you my fans for 20 rupees, but I need the payment of it on the day I make delivery of the fans. The wagon manufacturer may say, if you want monies upfront, I would want the fans for 15 rupees instead of 20. If you want full 20, please wait with me for a period of 8 months. The fan manufacturer thinks that I'm okay having 15 upfront rather than a fairly deferred payment 6 to 8 months later. The prime bidder, the wagon manufacturer, will have quoted 25 rupees for the same fans which are now sourced for 15 rupees. So the prime bidder takes an informed call of ensuring a higher margin or a premium against the trade-off of having to pay the fan manufacturer almost immediately. So this is the second way in which consideration part is taken care of. The third and the simplest way in which consideration payout can be managed is, in the illustration, the fan manufacturer says, I am fine with 20 rupees. I don't mind waiting for a period of 8 months. I am happy to receive payments when you receive payments. So these are the typical 3 ways in which consideration is managed as a part of the teaming arrangement.
After the project has been awarded and one of the partners back out, what possible remedies can be included in the teaming agreement to protect the primary bidder?
There are many remedies, some part of the teaming agreement and some part of mere participating in certain projects. For example, if we are looking at a public tender, then the risk that the partner has onto itself by backing out at a later point in time could be as serious as being blacklisted and not being able to participate in future projects, which is an absolute tarnish from a business perspective. From the teaming agreement perspective, for other commercial contracts, the most effective ways are to ensure that the proposal which is submitted as a part of the teaming obligation covers almost all the facets of contract, which means proposal when submitted and when accepted by the prime bidder now becomes binding on the sub bidder. So all the remedies available under law, which includes enforcement through repudiation of contract or breach of contract, all these remedies that are available under regular regime of contracts law will trigger.
Go through one more example of any interesting teaming agreements that you've dealt with, may it be local or cross-border.
The one that comes to my mind is where BSNL was offloading most of its technology piece as a part of what is popularly understood as PPP, the public-private partnership bit. That was interesting for several reasons. We are looking at the customer base of millions of people. We are looking at complex technology structure, a blend of old technology with new, which got built on over a period of time. And so there are issues to do with sensitivity with respect to confidentiality, because we are now looking at personally identifiable data, which is data of people like you and me. We are looking at first comprehending the technology piece that is already in place for BSNL and replacing it or adding a layer of refined technology with the objective and purpose of upgrading it. The most complex of all is all these integrations have to happen seamlessly. So these cannot result into disruption of services by BSNL as a telecom service provider. So again, to emphasize, teaming agreements are an excellent vehicle to ensure that you have the right teaming partner, you have the right frame of business engagement, and above all, the mindset to participate with a vision to make the project a success. Thank you so much. Thank you all for participating.